All right, welcome in to another edition of Carps Corner. We got the Penn State preview edition. Ohio State Buckeyes heading to Happy Valley. Noon kick. Big Noon's going to be there. Very exciting game. Huge prospects for this ranked team. Penn State obviously ranked right outside the top 10. Simply one loss to Michigan. It's a big year for James Franklin coming into this season. They were 20 over his last 22 games. I believe he was 11-11. And so this was important for him to get back on track. They have done that thus far. Last year they were 5-0, lost their quarterback, Sean Clifford. All of a sudden, whoosh, the wheels fell off, lost to Illinois, Iowa. It's a whole mess. They spiraled. This year they lose to Michigan. Not quite as bad. They get beat pretty good, soundly. Offense, doesn't do a whole lot, and defense gives up a lot. But ultimately, they were able to bounce back and beat Minnesota last week. And so it looks like this Penn State team is trending towards, probably a 2, maybe 3 loss season, depending if they can keep this thing together. They already played, in my opinion, 2 of the toughest teams in the Big Ten in Michigan and Minnesota. I don't believe Illinois is on their schedule. And so now they have Ohio State. So they're 1-1. They close the season with Michigan State. Normally a tougher game, big rivalry game, but not nearly as big this year given how they've been ultimately been playing. So that's important to note. And looking at where they're at and what the prospects potentially are for them being able to ultimately have some success moving forward. Goodness, I lost my phone here. I don't even know where it went. So here we go. So some big things here. Got to be able to control some stuff. So some big stuff here to take note of for this game. Happy Valley, it's going to be loud. Won't be as loud at night it won't be as loud at noon as it is at night. And so that's one of the things. Fox grabbing this game, making a big noon kick. Yeah, it takes a little sizzle off of it, but it's a benefit to Ohio State. Ohio State is a 15-point favorite. If it was at night, I'd probably drop that thing to 9.5. That is how big the crowd noise and the environment can be at Penn State. We'll listen to Ryan when he talks about 2020, them pumping in crowd noise, and some things that Cade Stover had to say, Cody Simon had to say. But it's a problem. I've been there twice. I was 1-1, barely escaped with the win one time, barely lost the second. Ohio State is, I believe, 9-1 or 10-1 in their last handful of meetings against Penn State. But most of those games have been close. There's only been, I think, 2 which you can kind of consider blowouts. And Penn State ultimately has won one of those as well in 2016 when they won the Big Ten. So there's a lot that goes into this. When you try to figure this out, here's what I know. Penn State's giving up 33 points a game. They're allowing 18 points a game. They're giving up they're rushing for 178 yards a game. They need to run the football. And that's how they're ultimately successful. Sean Clifford, good player, but just a guy. He's a veteran player. He understands it. He knows where to go with the football, but he needs protection. If he doesn't have it, we saw against Michigan him squirt out and go make a play down the field and make a huge play for him. Eventually leading to 7 points. So that was a big deal that he was able to get done. So kudos to him. They've got good skill players, and we'll get into some of those guys lately on the offensive side. Offensive line is not very good. And I was playing this game at Ohio State about how many guys Ohio State currently has in the NFL on the offensive line. It's over 10. I think it's 11, 12. It might even been 13 if I was counting right. Mickey Marotti and I. And looking at Penn State, I don't think they have more than 3. And so their offensive line has always been their issue. They've always had the skill dudes. They haven't been able to block them up. And that's why when they play teams that aren't very good and average teams in the Big Ten, they're able to bully them because they can get enough of a crease that the running backs, Allen and Singleton, can go hit it. You can give Clifford enough protection to find their receivers down the field. They've got good players. Defense is always usually really solid. They just haven't developed offensive line. And so I get to my keys to the game. We'll start looking into that a little bit as well. But first, I'm going to hear some things about from a couple of the players. First, I want to hear a guy who's having a huge year in Cade Stover. You'll flip it over from tight end. And no one knew really what to expect, especially him, but it's been pretty good.
No. I mean, I really tried to come in here without any expectations, as hard as that is. I mean, no, I would not say I expect this whatsoever. But it's nice. It's nice to play, really showcase what you can do. And it's nice to have the opportunities and the teammates really give me a chance to do it.
That's kind of the way Cade is. I joke, we're going to brand him up Farmer Gronk. That's the way we're going to go with it. But he's had a huge year. He's been great in the run game, which we knew. But the pass game, I don't think people realized this guy was a running back in high school. He's an all-state player. I mean, he can move. He's tall, but he's athletic. He may not have ultra elite top end speed. And that's probably why he's a little more suited for, tight end than possibly linebacker. But he's been really stinking good. He can go up and catch the ball, and he has been a security blanket and a red zone threat for this offense in CJ Stroud. So that's huge right there. That's been a catalyst for this offense. Looking to the other side, the defense. D-line's been good. Safety's been good. Second corners, they've been some ups and downs, been an injured group. So that's been a little rocky at times. But 3 really good corners have emerged. And we got to see them doing three really good linebackers have emerged. And we know about Tommy. He's been great. We know about Steele. He's been great. And Cody Simon has been playing a lot as well. And when they go to their big personnel, their 3 linebacker groups, Cody's the guy that comes in, and he'll rotate with those guys. And so ask Cody, talking about the closeness of the room, Steele and Tommy and all their relationships.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of my closest friends on the team, and they're even closer together. But like, the way they play, they motivate everybody else in the field, and I stay next to them and stay on their hip, and when they do well, that means I'm doing well, and when I do well, that means they're doing well. So everything that we do is it's all as a team, as a brotherhood.
And so this is what's tremendous is that Steele and Tommy and Cade all live together. Those guys play like euchre every night with those 2, and then Cade and his girlfriend they're a pair, and that's what they do. And then Cody has been hanging around Steele and Tommy a ton as well. And it reminds me a lot, and I talk to these guys this offseason, you got to be close. And maybe don't have to be best friends. I was fortunate enough to be best friends with the 2 guys who I played with, but you have to have a closeness and a oneness. So when you're on the field, communication comes easy. You know what the person's thinking around you because you spend so much time with them. So sometimes it's just a look, it's just a little hand gesture. And without giving anything away, you can change things on the fly and to know that everybody's seeing the same picture. Those guys have that. And Cody's getting in there with them on it. And it's been pretty awesome. It worked out together this whole offseason, and Steele and Tommy a ton. And then Cody was in there as well. And so you can see that starting to pay dividends now on the field as we're almost, 3/4 the way through the season. The success that they've been able to have is due to the fact they're able to play fast, they're able to play aggressive because they know what to do and everyone knows where to fit. And so that's a huge piece that cannot be understated of how good this defense is. And a lot of it's due to the glue right there in the middle that takes the back end and marries it to the front end so that you're able to have, a cohesive unit. And it's not just DBs and linemen with some linebackers sprinkled in the middle. Now the Penn State noise, crazy loud. None of these guys that are playing, maybe some of the 5th years that were there in 2018 have ever been there with a huge capacity crowd of 109, 10, whatever, how many thousand it is, playing Zombie Nation, deck, jumping around, going crazy. Now, like I said, it's not going to be at night, but Ryan talked about how bad it was in 2020 when they were piping in the noise and the environment they could expect.
Well, with the noise that they piped in that game, it was, between, like, if we're just sitting like a foot from each other, you couldn't hear. And then we had the masks on. So, you're trying to communicate with somebody in an arena where, the noise they were pumping in was so loud you couldn't communicate. So then you're pulling your mask out and trying to yell at somebody and they say you got to put your mask up. So it was very difficult, very frustrating and strange. Just being in a stadium where there's just no fans was a very unique situation. But good to get back there this week. There's only a handful of guys that were there in 2018 when we went last time. So, I know a lot of our guys are looking forward to playing in this one.
It's going to be loud. They're piping in music before, but it's going to be a raucous environment. Now, it'll be interesting to see. It's been a long time since Ohio played there at noon. 20 years, in fact. 2001 was the last time they played a noon game against Penn State. We played at 3:30 in 03, first whiteout in 95. I believe 2009 was a 3:30 as well, but those almost feel like night games because it's so late in the year and it gets dark at halftime. So it's always a good environment. This will be a little different. We'll see if the crowd's there and they're amped up and ready to go in time. Now, one of the things Ohio State has been doing a great job of, scoring defense, is right there in the top 5. Total defense right there in the top 5. Huge area of improvement. Third down defense, second in the nation, only allowing 24% conversion rate. That's massive. If you can keep a team below 40% you're doing a good job. 33%, you're doing well. 24% is second in the country. And that is what has allowed this Ohio State offense to score so many points. Because if you get a first down, you're probably going to run in there a couple of minutes of clock off. You get another one, you keep running clock. Ohio State's defense has been great. They've been getting turnovers also as of late, especially last week against Iowa, but getting those 3 and outs, getting off the field and getting the ball back to the offense so they can go do their work and stay in rhythm. And it keeps the offense fresh. So that's another big piece, or keeps the defense fresh rather, since you're not playing a lot. You got a great story here. 2003 with Scott McMullen. He was our backup quarterback. We're playing Penn State. I think we're like 6 or 7, 7-1, 8-1 at the time. Game toward the end of the season. Krenz was a starter. You know, we lost to Wisconsin, but if we win out, we feel like we still have a good chance at the national championship game. Well, it's Halloween weekend. It's November 1st. We're going to go down to Athens when we get back from the game. So 3:30 game, get over 6:37. Figured we'd be landing back in Columbus by maybe 9:30, 10. Drive straight from the airport, get down to Athens about, 11 and change. Still have a decent little night. So Scott wasn't planning on playing. AJ or Mangold and I are going to go together, and Scott's going to come too. Nick and I are both starting, playing a lot, out there on the field a ton. Scott's the backup. Krenzel goes down. Scott becomes the starting quarterback. We're down 17-7 when Scott gets in there. Scott McMullen goes on to ultimately throw 2 touchdown passes, win the game for us, 21 or 24-20, whatever it is, and 21-20 or something. But we're to the point where, I think we were down 3 at one point, and Scott's in the red zone. Call timeout. They're talking. Scott walks over to Mangold and I, or over to AJ and I. Mangold's in the huddle with the offense. And Scott McMullen looks over, and he had been asking if we were going to make it. He's like, if this game goes to overtime, it wasn't supposed to be close. We're not going to be able to get to OU. He's like, we're not going to be able to go to Halloween. And he comes over 3 or 4 times. Like, gosh, you think we're to make it? Like, Scott, now you're playing, dude. Like, let's try to win this game. We'll worry about OU later. If we have to party in Columbus tonight, that's not the worst thing in the world. And so he comes over. He had thrown I remembered it wrongly. I looked it up this morning. He had thrown a backline touchdown to Santonio Holmes that had gotten called back. There's an illegal lineman downfield. Scott threw it across his body after scrambling, ill-advised throw, throws in a dart. This guy comes over to us. He's like, this game ain't going to overtime. He's like, I'm going to zip it in there. We're throwing it to Jenks. And either it's getting picked off or it's a touchdown. He's like, but we're not kicking a field goal. That's for darn sure. And I'll be damned if Scott McMullen didn't line back up there, the gunslinger, the Granville gunslinger, and slung it in there to Michael Jenkins, 2 touchdowns that day, and ultimately won us the game. And then ultimately, when we got back, we did go to Athens that night and had one heck of a time. So it was a lot of fun, and all's well that ended well. But as I sat there and looked at that story and thinking of Scott, it's bewildering to me now that how all that went down. And the fact that we still did go to Athens, we didn't go to overtime, and we ultimately won the game. But how Scott was just so bound and determined, because he had gone every year. And I'd gone 3 years in high school. I'd went my freshman year, junior year, or it's my sophomore year in college. Mangold had gone down before as well because his girlfriend lived down there. And so it was a big deal. His girlfriend was going to Athens, now his wife. So that's a little story there, a little on Penn State. 3 keys to victory. Ohio State has to beat up the Penn State offensive line. D-line is good. Mike Hall, Sawyer, JTT, Zach Harrison's playing well, Teron Vincent. These guys have got to get going and dominate up front. Shouldn't even be a question. They're not very good up there. On the other side of the rock, second key to victory, Penn State's defensive line. This is the worst defensive line from talking to people they've had in a while. Not even worse than Wisconsin's. Iowa was really good last week, so don't think that there's going to be carryover there. Penn State's good in some other spots. We'll get talking about being backed up, their back end and everything. They're good at linebacker. They're good in the secondary. They're not good up front. Establishing the run is going to be key. Offensive line, bludgeoning them. And then lastly, no turnovers. Michigan kept him in the game. They let Clifford out on a scramble early, gave him a touchdown. And then McCarthy threw a pick 6. It's bouncing off helmets, picked off in the flat, and then housed. And that's why Penn State at one point was leading 17-14 or 17-13. Like they had no business being ahead in that game. So do not turn the ball over. Play a clean game that way. Ohio State's been very good at that this year. Players to watch. junior cornerback Joey Porter Jr. Yep, that's right. That's the son of Joey Porter, Steelers legend. Playing really good. Does a great job. Tight, sticky coverage. His partner back there, Kalen King, sophomore, also does a great job. Sticky coverage. Emeka Ibuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Julian Fleming. They're going to have their work cut out for him. If Jackson gets in there, I'm tending to believe he probably won't, but if he does, it's the same thing. Creating separation with those guys, creating a rhythm, giving Stroud windows to throw the football. Two other players to watch, and these guys are paired up, Nick Singleton and then Katron Allen. Both true freshmen. Singleton has over like 560 yards on the ground. Allen has almost 400. They're both averaging well over 5 yards a carry. These guys are dangerous, but against good teams, against Michigan, they weren't very effective because they weren't able to create holes. Against bad teams, their offensive line's average. They can get holes. They can find lanes, but they can't do it. And so that's going to be on this Buckeye defensive line to squeeze them down and to make sure they can't get out. I think Ohio State covers the 15. I think they win this game probably 38-13. Sounds about right. Maybe they get to 42. Wouldn't shock me. It could be a game though in the fourth quarter, but where Penn State is bad is right now is the lines, and James Franklin knows it. He understands it. That's why they're going to lean into their skill position and try to make plays there to be able to have success. So that is going to be the pathway to victory for Ohio State. Those are some players ultimately to watch. And Trey and Mayan should be able to have a really nice day. Got another week under their belts. Both appear to be fully healthy now after, last week kind of working back into some things after a bye. Those guys should be able to be really efficient if we can open up some holes and seams. And I know Ryan is going to want to lean on the run, on the road, with that toughness, the competitive stamina, all the things he talks about. He's going to keep that running game going all the way up until the final week of the season. There's a reason for that. It's intentional. And then lastly, I'll leave you with this. Sean Clifford, Ohio guy, Cincinnati guy, their quarterback. Good, solid player. And has done a good job leading this team. Not a crazy high ceiling, but a pretty high floor. The safe pick. The freshman, Drew Aller, out of Cleveland. Really, really talented kid. He's gotten some run this year. I think they stuck with Clifford because they knew they could probably get to 9 wins with him, and they probably wouldn't beat Ohio State or Michigan anyway. Drew Aller, I think, is that guy that could lead them to potentially be that. He reminds me a lot of Josh Allen with the Bills. He's big, he's physical, he's a better runner than you think, and he's got a big time arm. So be careful. If things go a little bit sideways, you get a chance to see Drew Aller in this game. It would not surprise me, especially since it's against Ohio State. Coaches love to troll, and the fact that they were able to get him due to the recruiting lapses and how everything happened with Quinn Ewers and him reclassifying and all that. They lose Drew Aller, and he ultimately goes to Penn State. And he's probably going to have a pretty darn good career there. So kudos to him. That's the preview you're going to have of the Ohio State-Penn State match. Big noon, Ohio State 15-point favorites. I think they cover, pull away in the second half. They're too good up front on both sides of the ball, and that, to me, is ultimately the difference. So thank you for watching. Listen, subscribe, like, share with your friends, throw out comments. I'll try to answer everything I possibly can. And go Bucks. Hopefully get a big win on Halloween weekend.